Good morning, everybody. I'm very grateful to be sharing space and grace with all of you today. The title of my talk is How She Got Here, the 170-year progressive call of Underwood. Last year, Underwood called its 22nd pastor in our now 171-year history. The process was difficult, and the search committee could never entirely agree on anything. After narrowing the search to 2 candidates, the committee spent weeks feeling torn, collectively and individually, over who to call. Then we opened ourselves to prayer, to saying our own and receiving those of our congregation. At our next meeting, we went around the room and everyone said the same name, Kate Fields. The church voted unanimously to call her, and she graciously accepted. When we shared our experience of God's call, Pastor Kate told us she'd been called by Underwood's history. Underwood has a long, rich history of loving and serving those who have been pushed to the margins of society. Time and again, Underwood has chosen to follow Jesus' teachings over the status quo. And though we've been tested, God always ensures that we not only persevere, but thrive. Our church was founded on October 11th, 1845, when 31 charter members voted to separate from Greenfield Baptist Church in West Allis over the question of slavery. The charter members were all white farmers in the Wisconsin Territory, which was an important stop on the Underground Railroad as slaves made their way to Canada. One of the first acts by the new church was to deny membership to anyone owning slaves or supporting slavery. For many years, church members worked to elect anti-slavery candidates to public office, helped fund the abolitionist newspaper The American Freeman, and gave refuge to fugitive slaves as part of the Underground Railroad. In 1849, 1 year after Wisconsin became a state, the church ordained its first pastor, Enoch Underwood. Enoch, one of the church's charter members, was a leader of the Underground Railroad in what is now Wauwatosa. He and his wife Harriet sheltered several individuals seeking freedom in Canada. The fledgling church had spent several years seeking a pastor before Enoch was called from plow to pulpit. Enoch was an uneducated farmer and accepted the position on a temporary basis, believing that the church could and would find a more qualified pastor. But none proved more qualified for laying the foundation of our church than Enoch Underwood. And he went on to serve as pastor for 38 years. In 1908, 20 years after his death, our church was named Underwood Memorial Baptist Church in his honor. At the turn of the 20th century, members of Underwood took to the social activism and reforms of the progressive era with gusto. Underwood members advanced the causes of prohibition, education, and perhaps most importantly, the cause of women. Before women had the right to vote, or many other rights for that matter, Underwood women were encouraged to become leaders in our church and beyond. Many leaders started by participating in what was called experience dollar meetings. For these meetings, each woman was expected to earn $1 on her own, which very few women did at the time, and then to donate the money to the Women's Mission Society. 30 years later, in 1944, Underwood hired its first woman as associate pastor. And since 2002, all of our senior pastors have been women. Despite the history of our church's founding, in the years following World War II, church members found racial equity more challenging than gender equity. One Sunday, some members walked out of service because a man who gave the sermon, the pastor's friend from seminary, was African American. Others left the church altogether as Underwood became increasingly involved in the struggle for racial equality. Underwood membership did not suffer when these members left. Oh, on the contrary, membership soared at the Friendly Baptist Church, which was how we were known. In fact, our membership doubled in size. Unlike other churches, we were known for our open-door policy of accepting all people and any religious belief that they might hold. Case in point, for almost 20 years, Underwood hosted an annual Foreign Student Day, which was attended each year by dozens of students from around the world. Underwood strove to make these foreigners feel at home when they were miles away from their own. A generation later, we extended the same sense of hospitality to political refugees, helping individuals and families start a new life in the United States. Underwood also strove to make African Americans feel at home in Milwaukee. In the late 1960s, Underwood members and ministers participated in Milwaukee's open housing marches. For 200 consecutive days, African Americans and allies marched against housing discrimination based upon race. A wonderful side effect of the marches was the forging of lasting relationships. In the late 1960s, Underwood and Mount Moriah Baptist Church held a joint vacation Bible school. 20 years later, the two churches began holding interracial worship services and alternated hosting the services. These services were well attended and highly effective at overcoming racial divides. In the 1980s, Underwood was also active in overcoming geographical and political divides. We did our part to thaw Cold War hostilities by sending our pastor to the Soviet Union several times, becoming sister churches with a church in East Germany, and starting a chapter of the Baptist Peace Fellowship. Our efforts were driven by our centuries-old commitment to personal freedom, our belief in the inherent worth of each individual, and our knowing that we are all one. With the new millennium came the opportunity for us to demonstrate this same commitment to personal freedom, belief in individuals' worth, and knowledge of our oneness. We did so by becoming welcoming and affirming of all people, regardless of sexual orientation and gender identity. When we lovingly invited LGBT people to join us as they are, we broke away from other Baptist churches just as our founders had over slavery. And we lost some members just as we had in the late 1940s when we positioned ourselves at the forefront of the fight for equality for African Americans. But we've also gained so much more. What our church believes and does are manifestations of who God is and what God means to us. We love our church and our fellow humans, and that love has continuously placed us on the right side of history. We continue to break from the past as God guides us in new directions, just as we have since 1845. When God guided us in calling Pastor Kate, she not only became Underwood's newest pastor, but the first openly gay Baptist pastor in the state of Wisconsin. Pastor Kate was called by God through our history, and in the process has made history herself. We don't know what the future holds, but the past has shown us that when we follow Jesus' teachings, our little church makes the bigger world a better place. Thank you.